G'day and welcome to AOS Coach. One of the most common questions I see from new Age of Sigmar players is what army should I start with? If you're new to the hobby, I can appreciate that you do not want to make a bad choice and waste your money. So in this video, I'm going to share some advice on where I think you should potentially start with your first Age of Sigmar army, along with some considerations. However, I do want to share with you that I truly believe in the rule of cool. And what I mean by the rule of cool is if you see something you are excited to build, to paint, and to play, regardless of how popular or unpopular it is in Age of Sigmar, I will always recommend you choose where your heart is telling you to choose. If you're excited, you're excited. But in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about and focus on the cheapest armies to buy, the easiest to paint, the simplest to play with, and as well as the armies with the greatest lifespan. Again, choose what you want to choose, but here's some categories to maybe get you started. Starting off with the cheapest army to buy. If you're looking to spend the least amount of money on your hobby because you don't quite know what you want to play yet, you haven't learned how to paint yet, and you're really trying to get a feel of things, you might want to start off with the Stormcast Eternals, the Flesh Eater Courts, the Beastclaw Raiders, which are a subset of the Ogre Moor tribes, as well as Iron Jaws, which is a subset of the Auric War clans. Now again, that's not to say that you can't get a good deal on any army, whether it's at a local game store, whether you see it on a eBay or a Facebook page, whatever it might be, but just stock standard, off the shelf, these are probably the 4 cheapest of the armies to start with. And let's look why. So the Stormcast Eternals are the mighty warriors with the power of the heavens cracking through their veins, and the Stormcast Eternals have been around since the start of Age of Sigmar. They've been around for a number of years now, but more importantly, they've been in almost every starter box that Age of Sigmar put out, both the first edition, the second edition, and you will find that they have had a lot of great value entry points to get in. So whether you buy it brand new off the shelf or maybe you pick it up for the very first time, the Stormcast Eternals have 2 start collecting boxes. These are value boxes that Games Workshop will put together a series of miniatures that will usually work together quite well. It might be a hero, it could be a monster, it could be a series of troops or special units. I do have a video all about the start collecting boxes. At currently of recording, there are 28 boxes of start collectings, but long story short, Stormcast Eternals are a wonderful and cheap way to get into the hobby. The Flesh Eater Courts are afflicted by the morbid curse, and the Flesh Eater Courts truly believe that they are noble warriors, but really they are ghouls. They are cannibalistic ghouls, and this particular box, the Flesh Eater Court Start Collecting box, is probably, in my opinion, one of the most versatile start collecting boxes, because not only will you get a lot of value in it, but you're going to get a lot of what you need from 1, 2, or maybe 3 boxes. By choosing 3 boxes, you could have what's called a 2,000 point army, which is probably the most common points value currently that we play. So you could have something like a big monster like the Royal Terror guys. You're going to get some troops here like the Horrors or the Flayers, and you get some ghouls and a hero as well. So a lot of good value, and again, 2, 3, 4 boxes, which are quite cheap, will actually get you almost everything you need. Another great value starter box is the Beastclaw Raiders of the Ogre Moor tribes, and these Ogre Moor tribes, the Beastclaw Raiders, are the nomadic ogres who are going to ride these immense war beasts into battle, and they are followed everywhere by what's called the Everwinter, this cursed storm that is freezing their enemies and empowering those ogres. And much like the Flesh Eater Courts box, you get a lot of what you need to start an army. It is incredible value both by price but also by points. The way that we play Age of Sigmar is using points. That's how we try to find what's a fair matchup in very similar value of an army. And the Beastclaw Raiders, these guys, especially there's the less miniatures you'll notice compared to the Flesh Eater Courts, but the point value and the strength and even the size of these units are much larger than the Flesh Eater Courts. So both between Flesh Eater Courts and the Beastclaw Raiders, both really good value to start with. Another high value start collecting box, probably not as versatile as the other two, but another one that is, when I say cheap to buy, it's because, you know, you're only going to need a couple of these boxes, or you're only going to need a little bit in addition to the start collecting to actually have that that usable force, is the Auric War Clan, specifically the Iron Jaws. And these guys are phenomenal. They are they're the muscle men. They are the orcs, or the Aurics, the true warriors of the orc faction. And when you look at the Iron Jaws, you know, you've got this amazing cabbage-looking like monster called a Maw Crusher, which no Iron Jaws army's gonna leave home without. But again, probably two of these boxes, as well as that big Maw Crusher, is going to get a lot of what you need. So they don't have the deepest roster specifically, but there is ways to expand it with their more savage version of the Auric. So you can absolutely stay in this faction a fair while. Now, we talked a little bit about the price point. Let's talk a bit about ease of paint, because I know some of you, this is the very first time you're getting into miniature painting, and it is a skill set. You're never going to be perfect at the start. It is constantly practicing. I've been in the hobby now for 20 years, and I'm still learning new techniques. I'm still getting better, so don't beat yourself up. It is a lesson to learn. But when we look at the different types of armies out there, there are whole ranges of skills. Some are quite hard to paint, some are easier to paint. So if you're looking for something that's going to be a little bit easier to start with from a painting point of view, your Nighthaunt, your Stormcast Eternals, your Maggotkin of Nurgle, and the Gloomspite Git, specifically the Squigs. Again, we'll talk about this in a second, but these are probably the easiest to paint and probably a really good place to start with. However, there are other factions out there like the Seraphon, like Khorne, like Flesh Eater Courts that probably aren't very far away. So when it comes to Nighthaunt, these spooky ghosts are shaped by the magic of Nagash. These, they're ethereal horrors, and one of the things that I love about the Nighthaunt is they are beautiful sculpts, but they aren't necessarily super detailed. You can make this as simple to paint or as technical to paint as possible. Imagine they are ethereal, spooky ghosts, and Games Workshop produce some wonderful technical paint to get this kind of ethereal type of, almost invisible like colors. So you could do very, very super simple schemes, but also there is some details that you could pick out. So as you build up your skills, whether you get more comfortable and you want to just test things out, the Nighthaunt can also be very technical and beautifully painted, as well as very simple. So great versatile army. The Stormcast Eternals, we've already talked a little bit about the Stormcast Eternals. They are they're cheaper to buy, but one of the great things about the Stormcast Eternals is you notice that these models are lots of armor. They could be painted gold, they could be painted silver, you could paint them whatever color you wanted. And because of the sharp detail of the armor, it's quite easy to pick out some of the detail. And some of these Games Workshop paints, and as you learn about painting, there is something called a wash, or essentially it's a bit of pigment that will fall into the recesses or the little nooks and crannies of the model. They will take this really well. And one thing I love about the Stormcast Eternals is that you can get your models with helmets or without helmets. So if you want to get into the detail of painting faces and you really want to try, you could absolutely do that. Or if you're still learning and you're not quite comfortable or confident in doing faces just yet, you could always put their helmets on and build the models with helmets, which would make things a whole lot easier. Another one that I think is absolutely fantastic to learn how to paint is the Maggotkin of Nurgle. The Maggotkin are these bloated, corpse gas, diseased forms, swelling, they're rotty. They are the servants of basically disease. And one thing I love about this from a painting point of view is that Nurgle miniatures are disgusting, and that's being a compliment. They are meant to be disgusting and vile and pussy and bloated and bloody. And what's really cool about that is sometimes as we're learning to paint miniatures, you'll make mistakes. You will, you won't be as neat as maybe someone who has been painting a little bit longer. but that's okay because Nurgle is messy and bloated, and it doesn't look perfect and pristine. So you can put on a bit of rust, you can put on a bit of blood, you can mess it up a little bit, and that looks perfectly fine in a Nurgle army. It's an easier way to hide your mistakes, but more importantly, it looks still great. The last of the series of the easiest to paint would be the Gloomspite Gits. These are the underworld goblins. They hide in caves. They are scheming. One of my personal favorite armies, but specifically the Squigs. And the Squigs, while they are, small and they could appear weak and cowardly, when they absolutely band together, they can be as absolutely deadly. And the Squigs are very, very easy to paint. They are super enjoyable to paint. You can just look at some of the pictures that I've got here, and they look like they're a whole bunch of fun. But also, they're not quite detailed. You can just paint them with 1 or 2 colors, and that would probably be, a really good starting point for yourself. And again, you can see, you can pick out some details as well. But Games Workshop have put out a product called Contrast Paints, and it's a combination of like your first layer, your primary or your base color, along with that wash that I was talking about earlier, that recesses. So it kind of allows you to get a few little tones of color in your paints. And the beautiful thing about something like the Squigs, as well as what I mentioned earlier about the Flesh Eater Courts, as well as the Seraphon, all of these armies probably take contrast really well. And to pick up some of those details, you can use a technique called dry brushing, which feel free to check out someone like Vince Ventrella, who can teach you how to dry brush. It's basically when you put a bit of paint on your brush, paint it on a wet paper towel to kind of get some of the liquid out, so you only got the color pigment left, and you build up your layers. So it's very, very easy to paint these guys. So whether it is your Squigs, whether it is going to be your Seraphon, or even your Flesh Eater Courts, they all take contrast paint really well, and dry brushing really well. The next way to look at your army could be the simplicity. How easy is it to play with your models? Because each army and each unit that you play with is going to have a set of rules. Imagine chess on steroids. You know that a pawn can move one spot. A pawn can't move to the side unless it's going into combat. You know how the horse moves. You know how the queen moves. Imagine every single model or every single unit in your army is going to have different rules like that, but as well as dice rolling that's going to come into play. So if you're thinking about how do I find the army that is simple to learn the game, because you're learning the mechanics of the game as well as learning the mechanics of your army, some of the armies that are probably easiest to pick up and probably the most forgiving is going to be armies like the Nighthaunt, the Flesh Eater Courts, the Maggotkin of Nurgle, and the Ironjaws. And the reason I pulled these out is because they, in their rules, they are probably the simplest that you can play. Not to say they aren't advanced, not to say that you can't be super tactical and you can't do some very interesting ways of playing with these armies, but they are more forgiving. Their interactions are a lot more straightforward, and they're just much more easier to learn. Some of the things that you'll notice with our characters, you have to measure ranges between, maybe units, or they can support each other in certain ways. These ones are much more simple to play with. If you're looking for something that is going to stay with you for a long time, you're making a transaction and you want to get the most value out of your army, the armies that probably on average have the longest lifespan will be the Stormcast Eternals, the Lumineth Realm Lords, the Slaves to Darkness, and the Cities of Sigmar. Now, the reason I've chosen those 4, and again, not saying that every other army doesn't have a long lifespan. I know Ironjaws players that have been playing with Ironjaws for many, many years now, and that's probably true of every army. But the reason I've chosen these 4 armies that will help you have a longer lifespan is that because these armies have a deep roster. These armies have more units to choose from, which essentially allows you to rotate them through your army, so you're not getting as bored as easy. If you have an army that only has, let's say, 10 different units to choose from, you're going to eventually paint and play with all these 10 different units in some form of combination, and you might get tired of them. You might not, but you might get tired of them. These armies have a lot more units to choose from, which means that at any point in time, you could find units that are fast in their movement. If you want to play with big monsters, you could do that. If you want something with strong magic, you can do that. You want to do shooting type units, combat units. These armies have them all, while some of the other armies maybe don't have access to all of the different tools in different ways. So these aren't always the simplest armies to paint with. They're not always the simplest armies to play with. However, once you've learnt their style, you'll really be here for the long haul. I've been playing the Cities of Sigmar for many years now, and I'm not bored of it because, again, I can constantly tweak and change my armies. So always different ways to play with them. So you've kind of got a rough idea, and, you know, Age of Sigmar has some awesome books, some awesome videos. You can learn more about the different faction. You can look at the web store. You can look at magazines to kind of get an idea of the armies and the models that most interest you. But when you're looking at the most cost-effective ways and the ways to kind of get into the game, we did mention the start collecting boxes, and there are 28 different start collecting boxes as this time of recording, and there may be more or there may be less down the line, who knows. But there are other ways to get into the hobby at a cheaper rate, or maybe a more value orientated rate. And what I'm referring to here is that Games Workshop offer these various start collecting boxes. Well, they're not specifically start collecting, but starter boxes that may have two different armies. So if you have a friend or a partner, you're trying to get into the hobby, maybe you want to split this box in half. Like you see here at the top of the screen, you've got Soul Wars and Shadow and Pain. Some of these boxes are limited edition, so they'll only have it for a certain period of time. Some things like the Soul War box might be around for a number of years. And these are great ways to get some dice, some measuring, some Age of Sigmar rules, and a really good point to get started. If you live in certain countries, Australia, I'm lucky to live in one of those lucky countries right now, and it seems to be expanding. There is a magazine called Immortal Realms magazine, which is cheap as chips. It has miniatures. Every issue seems to have miniatures, so it's a slow and easy way to get into the hobby, and probably a very cost-effective way when you look at the value that you get from these magazines. Very, very orientated to get people into the game. So if you happen to live in a country with the Immortal Realms magazine, that is a slow grow way to get into the hobby. And then at other times during the year, you will get things like Christmas, for example. There is this Battle Force box in the bottom right hand corner, and these are mega value boxes where, you know, you will probably get the combination of 2 or 3 start collecting boxes, but it's not just repackaging 3 boxes into one. They will really supercharge these Battle Force boxes, and they'll put a lot of cool stuff in there. And I know a lot of people get excited about these. They happen so far every year, every Christmas leading into Christmas. They've always had these boxes, and, you know, once they're sold, they're sold. So a great maybe a Christmas present or something to strive for. Now, I mentioned earlier at the show that I don't believe that there is a bad choice, and I truly believe in the rule of cool. There is no bad choice when it comes to choosing your first army. When you choose your first army, if you think about how much you're going to play versus how much you're going to paint and build, it's a very holistic hobby. You need to do all of the things, and you might hear on the internet that a certain army is more powerful than others at the moment. But if you're not excited about building it, if you're not excited about playing with them, and you're just seeing people talking about, you know, the strong army, and that changes, by the way. You know, it's all like a cycle. Right now, the Seraphon might be really popular and really strong right now, but, you know, the game does evolve over time, and it changes constantly. Books are updated. We have something called the General's Handbook, which is a compendium that every year the points value will increase and decrease on certain units. So the game is always evolving, and, you know, when a Seraphon army is strong right now, 3 to 6 months time, maybe they're not as strong, and maybe the Sylvaneth are at the top. So, you know, don't worry too much about who's sitting on top, who's not sitting on top. Really be excited about what you're building, painting, and playing with. Now, there is no one single way to do the hobby as well. If you are inspired to paint your Stormcast like the King Arthur's Knights, and you want to put like the cross of St. Julian, or the Knights Crusaders on your Stormcast, you do you. It's your hobby. There is lore in your battle tomes, which is a book that is a complimentary and tell you everything you need to know about your army. There will be some recommended paint schemes. There will be some advice on how to build your force, and some really cool stories that might inspire you to progress and continue your particular army. But again, this is a hobby. It is all about you. Enjoy your journey. And if you're thinking about how do I learn more? How do I bought my first miniature. What are the best choices? Or maybe how do I start to build this cohesive force? You'll find on this channel a whole range of videos about the different factions. So jump onto the AOS Coach main page. You'll find playlists dedicated to every single faction in the game, as well as some other advice about the hobby, as well as some interviews with other people that you might find interesting. But ultimately, check us out. You'll get some interesting ideas on how to continue or to refine your army. But again, welcome to the hobby. If you're listening to this for the first time, if you're joining us, you're going to have an absolute ball. Don't worry about finding the strongest armies. And if you find something you absolutely love, choose it. You do you. Also, if you've got any advice for somebody who's starting for the first time, please do leave it in the comment section. I'm sure anyone new to Age of Sigmar would appreciate to hear from other people about their army, or maybe some of the lessons and some tips and advice that you might want to share. So highly recommend take a few minutes to share your experience with people in the comment section below. I hope you found that discussion valuable. If you did, give the video the old thumbs up. And if you have a comment or an insight, leave it in the comment section below. The champions over here are my AOS Coach Patreons and YouTube members. So you guys are bloody legends. Thank you for all the support. If you want to know more about the support programs, the links are below down here in the episode description, along with a link to the Discord server, so we can continue this conversation. Until next time, don't forget to name your characters and have a good one.